Now, one of the things that came up that when I was reading, I wanted a little bit more clarity on is this idea of how we're looking at and even tracing the body's reaction to certain viruses, such as coronavirus and T cells versus antibodies. And I did look and, there's been a lot of talk about this, of how we're looking at it. Research in Sweden showed for every one person that was testing positive for antibodies, 2 were found to have specific T cells, which identify and destroy the infected cells. Is there a more accurate way when we look at something like COVID or any infection, when we're looking at T cells versus antibodies? Can you go into that just a little bit and clarify that?
So we think that the antibody response to the coronavirus only lasts a few months, whereas if we look at past SARS exposure, we can see that T cell immunity can last decades, even from other viruses as well. It can last much longer. Now, is there a better test in regards to, instead of looking at antibodies, looking at like T cell cross reactivity? Possibly. We don't know though if T cells sort of cross reacting to other types of, or to this virus, means that you have immunity against it. So for example, there are many studies that have recently come out that if you've been exposed to other coronaviruses like the common cold, that you have T cell cross reactivity to SARS-CoV-2. Now, we don't know if that means you have immunity to it though, but it's very likely that you have some type of immunity, meaning you probably are more likely to have a better response with prior exposures to coronaviruses because they're very similar in structure. Yes, they are different, but if you already have been exposed to a coronavirus, even if it's not this novel one, your T cells still have recognition to some of the structure of the current coronavirus.
And that brings me to the next point here, because you're talking about that exposure can be helpful from the T cell analysis of everything. And you bring up hygiene hypothesis in the book and, how being exposed can absolutely improve your immune system and basically train it like weightlifting sort of can for the muscles. How do you feel that antibiotics, hand sanitizers, this lockdown, masks has affected the immune system? And do you agree with the hygiene hypothesis that exposure can boost the immune system, and then living in a bubble, of course, and being incredibly sanitized will lower the immune system?
If anyone doesn't believe it, we have essentially pathogen receptors in our immune system. And so if you're not exposed to a pathogen, then you're not stimulating and boosting the immune system. So for example, how yeast beta glucan works is you are consuming the cell membrane of yeast, and you are sort of telling your body that there's a foreign substance, and our body mounts an immune response. So that's sort of how we know things boost the immune system, is if you give it a substance that the immune system thinks is a pathogen, then it will absolutely upregulate its number and the cytotoxicity of the immune cells. So we need to be exposed to things in order to prime our immune system. That's how it works.
Right. And it makes total sense, right? Isn't that how vaccines work in a sense? You're exposing it to it.
Right.
So this idea that just sitting inside and not doing anything until that comes about, well, I think you can be somewhat exposing yourself, just like playing in the dirt, getting your hands, can build the skin microbiome, can help. Right. They say children that are outdoors and exposed to other things and get those acute infections in early stages of life have a stronger immune system later in life, right?
Right. And you can even see this with natural births versus C-section when you're first inoculated, right, with the mother's microbiome.